Can no one be well? But I dreamt we all were beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can no one be well? But I dreamt we all were beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can no one be well? But I dreamt we all were beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can no one be well? But I dreamt we all were beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, no one can no one be well. We all were beautiful and strong. When the world can no one be We light our Unitarian Universalist chalice, symbol of our faith, the flame a reminder of the divine spark that dwells within each of us, within each of you, and connects us to each other and to all of creation. But I dreamt we all were beautiful and strong. Our Unitarian Universalist chalice.
As we come into this space, we also acknowledge the land that we are on. Con espíritu de reverencia, reconocemos que nos juntamos esta noche en la tierra de los Kumeyaay, quienes continúan viviendo en todo su territorio. Al emprender este viaje juntos, mantengamos en nuestros corazones y mentes el pueblo Kumeyaay. In a spirit of reverence, we acknowledge that we gather this evening on the land of the Kumeyaay, who continue to live throughout their territories. May the light of this candle shine for our commitment to the Kumeyaay people and to justice and equity for Indigenous people everywhere. Welcome into this space. I want to invite you to join me now in a time of meditation as we just more fully arrive in this time together. If it feels good for you, you might close your eyes or lower your gaze. Connect to the breath, breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. As we arrive in this space, just feel your body in whatever is holding you. Maybe the seat against your legs, your back against the back of the seat. Feel the placement of your hands and your feet. Continuing to breathe and feeling the support that surrounds you. the earth beneath you, the people surrounding you, the breath that enlivens and animates your body. As you feel comfortable and called, I invite you to open your eyes and to look around, to really see this space, to see the people that you are here with, to feel the gift and the gratitude of being together. Blessed be and welcome in. We're going to invite you to sing with us, I Am Sending You Light by Melanie DeMore.
Sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending to hold you in love. I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love.
And now I have the pleasure of welcoming up here our Pat Gordon, President of Camp de Benneville Pines Board. Welcome, Pat.
Things were going pretty well until I realized, but fortunately, that what I wanted to say was not on this piece of paper. So it's in my phone. Welcome, and I'd like to take this opportunity to get my cohort up here Janet James, my executive director. So you can have a Mutt and Jeff session here. And bear with me here, Janet, as I get to this. All right. I wanted to take a few minutes here and thank you all. So I have it written here. We called out to all Pacific Southwest area Unitarian Universalist congregations to inspire us in a time of stress and turmoil, because we need inspiration, what? Now more than ever. We asked you to share a 2 to 3 minute video that your congregation does that would inspire us all. Several congregations responded. We're grateful to you. Tonight, I'd like to share one of them now, just one. And they'll be in here playing in a loop as we move through various phases of coming into the meeting hall for the rest of the assembly. So watch them each time we gather here in the meeting house. Let's play the first video.
If you're able, kids, you can face your parents and show them how to do it. Oh, I thought I was going to do that later. Yes. Okay. In 2023, I was privileged to go to Camp de Benneville to Singing in the Pines. The music committee sent me, led by Don Milton, who's the music director at our Atlanta UU church. And he was speaking about making worship more engaging with all the senses, including kinesthetic movement, not just the UU intellectualism. Yes, you've heard of that. During the pandemic, when we were on Zoom, he recognized that people really needed a hug. People really needed something. So he created this movement prayer so that we can give ourselves a hug. And after Zoom, of course, they continued doing it in their service. And I thought this was a wonderful idea. I wanted especially our children to be able to do something that wasn't verbal, something moving. Because we like to move, right? All right. No. And it's great to get everybody else moving too. All right, the words are on the screen. This is how we do it. First we bow to honor the spirit of life. We lift our arms to embrace the gifts of spirit. We gather these gifts into ourselves and smile and breathe. We share these gifts with the world and remember to be present. We bow, embrace, gratitude, breathe, and be present. Thank you.
Well, thank you, San Luis Obispo. Nice. So we'll see more of those today. So, are we ready? Okay. So, Justine, Reverend Justine. We wanted to take a moment to give this congregation a gift for hosting us. You many days and hours and months that went into this. This is a wonderful experience that we're having, and with our full gratitude, wow, we thank you.
So this is a forest fairy, and she's come down from the top of the mountains to bring good luck and love and happiness to First Church.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Janet. This is beautiful. All right. I am privileged to welcome our keynote speaker, Peter Bolland, who is an adult camp favorite. His 3 days of talks and songs connect us with nature and spirituality every time he's at our adult camp as a presenter. He's sure to captivate you. He always does me. Thank you, Peter. Peter is a professor of philosophy and humanities at the Southwestern College of Chula Vista, California, where he has taught world religions, Asian philosophy, world mythology, and ethics for over 30 years. Let's give Peter a warm welcome.
Oh my goodness. Oh boy. Thank you. Thanks for that lovely welcome. And thank you to everybody for coming. This is I guess the intellectualism part of the weekend, but I am honestly so deeply honored to have been invited here to share some thoughts with you. Sometimes I do guest speaking in various Unitarian churches. I've seen a lot of you at Summit and other places, and they usually give me about 20 minutes, and then I take 30. And nobody cares, and I just love that about you. I've been in other denominational churches where there's someone in the front row with a stopwatch, and when you go over, you start getting this. Well-deserved, I'm sure, but we'll see how it goes tonight. They foolishly gave me 90 minutes. So, hope you're all coffeeed up, because we're going to midnight. No, listen, I'm a philosophy professor, as you heard, so I love questions more than answers. I trust questions and I distrust answers, because answers are just the next question. And so I am thrilled to be in a UU community, a place I feel really at home, because I know people in this tribe are curious and passionate and tenacious in their own investigations of the big questions, things that a lot of other people maybe don't want to think about as much. So I simply want to invite you into an inquiry tonight around, obviously, the title, Liberalism and Faith. I've been thinking a lot about the word liberal. By the way, I've been working on this talk for the last few months, day in and day out. Is there anything in the news that I missed these last couple of months? Yeah. No, I was at dinner. There was a lot of talk. So, the word liberal kind of is my starting point tonight, because last time I spoke at Summit, I noticed that right away when the service leader gets up, he or she reads the opening statement, and I think the first sentence is, "We are a liberal spiritual community." And it's wonderful to hear the word liberal used without irony and without shame, and completely, proudly, and honestly, and intellectually accurately. So I thought, philosophy, we're always talking about words and the meanings of words, and so I thought maybe I would sort of start building a talk around an inquiry into the word liberal. And what does liberal mean, and how has it been distorted and misused and so on? So I just want to take you through a kind of meandering look at some of those kinds of questions and what all of that has to do with religious liberty, because as you know, we are in strange times. Every time a cell phone rings, a teacher gets his wings. By the way, so the more the better. I want you all to turn your phones on, because I need some wings. So yeah, so thank you for the first one there. That's beautiful. Now I got to check mine, because I don't want to be, yeah, good, okay. I think I got it. So this first slide is just kind of a smattering of questions I want to think about with you a little bit. Well, like I already said, the evolution of the word liberal, and how our American experiment, this crazy thing we're trying to do these last 250 years, which is clearly rooted in classically liberal principles. Freedom, for example, just to put it into one word, has shifted toward clearly something else. Something else is in the mix right now. And how is this impacting faith communities like this one and all of the others? As we know, right-wing conservative Christians, evangelicals they're sometimes called, the term Christian nationalism is being thrown around a lot lately. Those kinds of amorphous clusters of groups, they have essentially co-opted the concept of religious liberty, curiously, to define themselves as an aggrieved class deserving of special protections. I know that you are readers of the news, and you often hear that strange claim being made that conservative Christians are under attack, that Christianity needs defense from its enemies. We want to explore that a little bit tonight. And therefore, the urgency of this project, the urgency of re-examining the wider, I would say, virtue of religious liberty, of religious freedom, freedom of conscience, which when folks of my generation, when we grew up, that's what we were told the United States was about. Freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, the freedom to believe whatever you wanted or nothing at all. And as Jefferson wrote in a letter to a friend, the separation of church and state, the opposite of theocracy. And as followers of the news, I know you know that there's something else moving through the heart of the American experience now. So and then just in a wider sense, because I love religion, I love studying world religions, isn't the core mission of religion in general to enhance human liberty, not restrict it? And I know that's maybe a subject that requires much, much more investigation. Some of you, I can hear you scratching your heads and say, well, actually, religion is responsible for a lot of oppression and restriction, and you're right there too. But in the deeper sense, and we'll circle around to that. And then finally, what's the takeaway for us? What are we supposed to do as people of conscience, as citizens, as people in the world who are trying to figure out in our spiritual communities, what can we do? And trust me, I know I'm in a room full of activists here. I'm not going to give you some patronizing to-do list. Call your representative. We've all been trained, and we all know what to do and how to do it. So I'm not that guy. I'm going to be thinking about these things, again, in a kind of a broader way. So let's stop in and backfill a little detail to catch us all up on some of these terms that I want to think about with you tonight. Christian nationalism. So in the public square, there's a newly emboldened Christian nationalist movement seeking to go the other way from religious liberty, openly advocating for a one-religion, theocratic, strongman rule with fundamentalist, literalist, regressive Christianity at the center of all aspects of American life. And a minority of Americans are really happy about that and are advocating fully for that. And so we aren't here to kind of do the whole deep analysis of all the varieties of Christian nationalism, but just to refresh your mind, I bet you already know that already. So Christian nationalist voices, and there are many of them, they are generally proudly jingoistic or anti-immigrant. They are proudly white supremacist. It's not even subtle or secret anymore. They are proudly anti-Semitic. They are misogynistic, patriarchal, and deeply anti-LGBTQ+. This isn't my opinion. This is a simple summary of their own positions and statements from across a wide variety of written sources in print and in digital media. So I just feel like it's important to say it out loud like that and stop tiptoeing around this. I think now I'm off script already. I think there is no script. I think one of the weaknesses of the liberal position is we're just too nice. And we always want to get along, and we want to respect every opinion. And a Unitarian friend of mine who isn't here tonight said, I'm kind of tired of our Unitarian communities always saying, we welcome everyone. Maybe we don't welcome people who want to come in here who are openly jingoistic, anti-immigrant, white supremacist, anti-Semitic, misogynistic, and LGBTQ+, and are trying to literally tear down everything we've been trying to do for 200 years. Not that we're going to bar the doors, but that sense of maybe not all opinions are of equal value. Is that a dangerous moral relativism? What happens when you have convictions and you state them? Are you too judgmental? Are you excluding other voices? And I think the only ones who care about things like that are liberals. And it's a strange trap that we kind of get ourselves into. Again, I'm not giving anybody advice or marching orders here. These are the kind of questions that literally haunt me. It's called the paradox of tolerance. The philosopher Karl Popper taught about it. That if you tolerate intolerance, intolerance will gain power until it outlaws tolerance. Too much tolerance is suicide. And now you have the tougher job. That's much harder than just loving everybody and everything. The tougher job is making hard discernments and drawing those lines and saying, Nazism is not okay. And I know this happens in the New Thought community too. They're very reluctant to say what they're against. They always only want to talk about what they are for. And so these are the difficult spiritual and philosophical questions that we're caught up in. So to cloud the waters even further, if all that isn't unpleasant enough, as I hinted at earlier, right-wing Christian groups often claim that their religious freedom is threatened by the very idea of diversity and inclusion, or even by the existence of other faiths. And they refer any challenges to right-wing evangelical Christianity as an inhibition of their religious liberty, a violation of their First Amendment rights. And I think it's important for us to sort of carefully think our way through that claim. So in other words, a lot of conservative Christians argue that they have the right to enhance their own liberty, read power, by restricting the liberty of others. And that seems to be something that maybe we ought to challenge a little bit more. I had the incredible honor and privilege of serving as one of California's 55 electors in the 2020 election. I got a phone call from my friend Amar Campanajjar, who was running for Congress, and he was in the district near my house, and he was the #1 vote getter in the March primary, and so party politics are such that he got to appoint one person from that district to be the elector in Sacramento in December of 2020 to be in the Electoral College. And he called me one day, I was at the grocery store. He's like, hey, Amar, hey, Peter, hey, do you want to be in the Electoral College? And I said, you mean that thing everybody hates? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah. Because I don't like the Electoral College either, and that's a subject for another talk. But I'm like, I get to be in the room when that's happening? Hell yeah. So I did it. So I got to go to Sacramento. As you recall, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris beat Donald Trump in November of 2020. And that fall, the Electoral College met all over the country and performed the rather perfunctory task of electing those two and so on and so on. So when January 6th came along, I, for the first time in my life, watched TV during the daytime, and it was this normally very boring thing where the vice president presiding over a dual-chambered House and Senate, we're going to ratify the Electoral College vote. I'm like, I'm going to watch this because my hand-signed ballots are in that box that Pence's hands are on. And then all of a sudden, all these people started showing up, and I don't need to tell you the rest. And I've been studying January 6th ever since then. And it turns out that Christian nationalist organizations were instrumental. And I didn't see it on January 6th, but looking back through the videos now, I see nothing but crosses and the co-option of Christianity and the conflation of that brand of Christianity with this radical kind of idea that Jesus is my Savior, but Trump is my president. And that was a few years ago, because now I think Donald Trump has actually risen to the place of Savior. And so this remarkable event, I shot past that picture, and it's such a good one. And now the president autographs Bibles. At meet and greets, when people shove Bibles into his hand, he writes his name on them. And these are just vignettes, little fleeting images. I don't want to stay there. I didn't come here to talk about the president. But this is the context of this inquiry that we're involved in, if I may borrow Yeats, slouching toward theocracy. So deeply informed by Project 2025. I love being in the UU room. You all know exactly what that is. And the current administration, of course, is deliberately moving toward one religion rule, in what many people argue is a direct violation of the First Amendment. And there's that one line that I'm referring to, of course. You all know it by heart. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So it is our stated constitutional policy in the United States that the House and Senate, that's Congress, 1/3 of the three branches of our tricameral government, are committed to staying out of the business of either establishing an official religion or restricting the free exercise of your and my religious conscience. The government, by design, let me knock over the chalice. That'll look great on the video. So maybe I should stay back here, safely back here. So that principle and standard, I used to think the Constitution was kind of like the scripture that the United States followed. And I won't finish that sentence, but. So Secretary of State Marco Rubio has ordered all State Department employees to report on one another for incidents of anti-Christian bias. So this is the strange Orwellian culture we live in now. And maybe we could take a moment to decode the phrase anti-Christian bias. You will hear it now continually for the next 4 years. And this is the victim consciousness of evangelical Christianity, that it is under attack. Do you know what they define as anti-Christian bias? Teaching pluralism. Allowing people to be free from coercion to pray in school. That's anti-Christian. Arresting violent anti-abortion protesters in front of a women's health clinic. That's called persecution of Christianity. Although, as you know, all the January 6 rioters were pardoned. So anything that slightly skirts toward holding people accountable who commit crimes who are also Christian is called anti-Christian bias. Anything that decenters a particular brand of Christianity, that evangelical, fundamentalist, literalist Christianity, anything that decenters that is referred to as an attack on Christianity, as anti-Christian bias. So a February 7, 2025 executive order, just a couple months ago, established something called the White House Faith Office. And this is and I just read through it again today, the executive order. It's a lengthy, that's what I do for fun. I need help, people. This document details a multifaceted effort to center conservative Christian interests in all government matters. So just, stick by stick, the barrier between church and state is being taken apart. And the two worlds are coming together. And that's not an accident, it's actually a plan. And it's a drip, drip, drip process, so it slips past us. These efforts are a de facto creation of a special class of Americans, namely conservative Christians, who deserve, therefore, special protections not afforded to other faith communities. So I'm taking you through this and chronicling this, not because I enjoy it, but because I think as citizens, staying informed is such an essential component of protecting our liberty and protecting our dignity, even if it's hard to do. Maybe you remember this case. I couldn't help but thinking about this in light of everything we're thinking about. In the landmark Supreme Court case, Masterpiece Cake Shop v. Colorado Civil Rights Commission, in June 2018, the U.S. Supreme Court narrowly ruled that a conservative Christian baker's religious liberty was being violated by a lower court that had ordered him to make a wedding cake for a same-sex marriage. Do you remember this case? I mean, it's about cake, so right there it's kind of hard to forget because cake is awesome. But here's this conservative Christian guy, this gay couple goes into his bakery, tries to order a wedding cake. Once he realizes what's happening, he refuses. And it moves its way up, Colorado Civil Rights Commission, et cetera. And his case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and as you just read, the conservative U.S. Supreme Court sided with the baker. That now it is legal, apparently. I'm going to switch it to a pizza shop. If I own a pizza shop, I get to discriminate against you. I'm not going to make a pizza for you if I don't like, the cut of your jib. That is to say, everybody now has the right to discriminate against anybody they want in the performance of economic processes, the exchange of goods and services. There are already laws on the books that make it illegal to discriminate in housing and in every other category of economic exchange on the basis of race, sexuality, gender, ability, et cetera, et cetera. So this ruling effectively legalized discrimination, opening the door for any business to refuse service on the basis of race, gender, ability, or sexual orientation. So here's the deeper question. Does baking a cake for a customer who is, pick any category you want, black, Jewish, gay, does baking a cake for someone in any meaningful way limit or restrict the baker's free exercise of their religion? I truly don't intellectually understand this argument. How someone who is a Mormon could sell an atheist a cake. And how does that in any way inhibit that Mormon baker's ability to exercise their free religion? The existence of gay people doesn't erase your anti-gay religious stance. That people get to be different. But this guy actually successfully argued that it does. That the existence of people who I feel are morally wrong means I don't have to exchange, I don't have to let them have I don't have to rent them a hotel room. I don't have to give them a table in my restaurant. I don't have to write a mortgage on their house. I don't have to drill teeth in their mouth as a dentist. I can turn them away from my gas station. That's what the U.S. Supreme Court now says. This is one of the many facets and flavors that happens when you center a particular religious perspective. Like, I'm sure he's a lovely guy. Look at him. I mean, he probably bakes a mean cake. But there's this, don't let the smiling face just fool you. There's something dark and dehumanizing about this process. And to just honestly see that. So, in philosophy, we talk a lot about something called the greater good. Society's complex. People can disagree. But is the greater good the baker's right to refuse service to people he doesn't morally approve of? Or is the greater good every other American's right to not be discriminated against on the basis of race, gender, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or disability? And that's an easy one for me. The baker's going down. But the U.S. Supreme Court went the other way. And this is our country now. And without saying that out loud and acknowledging that, it's kind of hard to figure out what the next steps are. So everybody loves liberty, everybody loves freedom, and you can hear in your poetic ear, liberty and liberal are really close together. So why is the word liberal become a dirty word? There's an interesting story to tell here. And a lot of us are, I know, I'm going there. A lot of us are the right age to have actually lived through the 90s and the 80s before that. And we know who this guy is. And we remember that Rush Limbaugh received the Presidential Medal of Freedom during the first Trump administration. In fact, it was in February in 2020. So who's Rush Limbaugh? He was born in 1951, passed away in 2021, 1 year after he received this. He dropped out of college and became a DJ at the age of 20 back in 1971, and he started in talk radio about 10 years later in the early 80s, and by the 90s, he was the highest rated syndicated talk radio personality in the country. And books have been written about AM talk radio in the 90s for very good reason. It's an important stepping stone to how we got here. And I want to think about why that is for a minute. So if you never heard Rush Limbaugh on the radio, 4 hours a day, five days a week, for years and years and years. He was glib, he was sarcastic, he's very witty, he's very fast, he's very smart. He's more than a little cruel, and very, very explicitly and casually racist and misogynistic, and laughing his way through all of it. You know, that phrase we all hear a lot now, that the cruelty is the point. It really kind of started here. And so Limbaugh used carefully crafted language to savage Democratic candidates, politicians, and liberal movements. And this is when the word liberal became a dirty word. This is when the word liberal became a catchphrase, and millions, I don't think we're ever going to get a good count, but millions and millions of mostly working class male listeners who work largely in their car, contractors, plumbers, realtors, all kinds of tow truck drivers and working class, a lot of white men drank this stuff up, ate it up, that snarling kind of resentment as entertainment. Now, he didn't invent white male grievance, all those guys you saw on January 6th. He didn't invent white male grievance, but he perfected it, and he pushed it into the mainstream, and he used it to fuel his own ambition to become a kingmaker. And so in Limbaugh's lexicon, there was no word more contemptible than liberal. It became this code word. It started to signify everything that was wrong with America, everything that was weak, everything that stood in the way of good Americans. It became so toxified from that repeated messaging that we kind of live in the aftermath of that. So, in other words, Limbaugh had wielded a powerful tool used by propagandists throughout history. And that tool is identify a single enemy. Don't talk about the world in complex, nuanced ways. Just find a single enemy and endlessly repeat the groundless claim that this enemy was keeping you from living the life that you deserve. And go back through Machiavelli and all the way back to Augustus Caesar, and obviously Goebbels and the Nazis and the Third Reich. I mean, this is propaganda 101. Pick one target and never stop talking about it. And it works. It's incredibly effective. And so you still hear Limbaugh's tactic used in right-wing messaging today, although they don't really use the word liberal exclusively. You hear words like woke, which, coming out of a kind of Buddhist tradition myself, awakening was always a positive thing. Being awake is better than being asleep, but now woke is a cuss word on the right. And the last presidential election was all about, I'm going to get woke out of America. Pete Hegseth is wringing every drop of woke out of the military. That means websites about the Tuskegee Airmen are coming down, and about Jackie Robinson's military service. Let's erase African Americans who served in the military. Let's erase women. Let's erase the Navajo code talkers. This is explicit patriarchal white supremacy. I wish journalists would talk like that. But they soft pedal everything. And so a lot of Americans think, oh, this isn't that bad. The words have evolved, but the effect is the same. Demonize your ideological opponent to the point where honest disagreement is no longer possible. Any other families besides mine ripped apart forever by the last 8 years of politics in America? Yeah. Thanksgiving, Christmas, it's just over now. Where honest disagreement is no longer possible and dissent is criminalized. If you're a college student at an American university studying on a student visa from abroad, you better not write a letter to the editor in your college newspaper criticizing the IDF's actions in Gaza. A van will pull up and unmarked federal agents wearing masks will throw you in a van, and 4 hours later you'll be at an airport on your way to a secret prison. I don't recognize these things as the country that I was told I was born in. And so these are, I know I'm going dark and I'm going hard. And you're all thinking the relentless despair of this is going to, I mean, we were just having fun an hour ago over there eating pizza. And now this guy promised me, I promise you I'm going to turn the light dimmer back up again. But I want to think a little bit further about the reality of where we are. Now, you know how propaganda works. I want to just mention one more example. Do you know what the OSS is? It's what they used to call the CIA. So back in World War II in the 1940s, the precursor to the CIA was called the OSS. Well, a little thing called World War II was happening, so it became very important to analyze Adolf Hitler. And that meant listening to all of his speeches, reading his crazy book, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. And so these OSS agents did an analysis of Adolf Hitler's messaging, and they found a pretty interesting list of his tactics. One, and by the way, they match perfectly Rush Limbaugh's tactics. I'm not saying Rush Limbaugh is a Nazi, but boy, did they just work from the same playbook. Never allow the public to cool off. Keep everybody angry and afraid, and keep them clear about why their grievance is not being recognized, and keep it clear that these people over here are the reason for your unemployment, are the reason for et cetera, et cetera. Never allow the public to cool off. Never admit fault or wrong. Throw all that Christian redemption out the window. Everything that we do is right and good and true and pure, and we've never made a mistake. All the problems in the world come from them. So never admit fault or wrong. Never concede that there may be some good in your enemy. Hitler never said, yeah, but you know, the Jews, they're pretty good at some stuff. It was always, Jews are unmitigated vermin. The only solution is extermination. So when you hear that all immigrants, et cetera, or, you know, I won't give the language voice in this sacred space. Never leave room for alternatives. Never accept blame. Concentrate on one enemy at a time, as we said earlier, and blame that enemy for everything that goes wrong. People will believe a big lie sooner than a little one. This is a rule from Augustus Caesar and perfected by the Nazis. The bigger the lie, the more likely people will believe it. So go big. And then just repeat it endlessly, 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 endlessly. And enough people will eventually believe it. The sad, sick thing about these 7 rules is, well, I don't need to tell you what happened in Germany. That the brilliant German people land of Goethe and Mozart and Brahms and Beethoven and Wagner. Hildegard of Bingen, the birth of natural science. Germany is an incredible place. Nobody's free of the influence of these tactics. Nobody's is safe from the influence of these tactics. Our country is now under the sway of these tactics. And so this is an old game, but you and I remember that there's more to this than these dark shadows. In any democracy, there's always passionate, vigorous disagreement, of course. But we remember a time, don't we? I certainly do, when Democrats and Republicans could debate fiercely about all kinds of policy issues and still get along, meet on common ground, the common ground of shared values. We both like freedom. We both like liberty. We both want to be safe. We both want to prosper. We both want to be left alone as much as possible. And we both want to live in a world where people are cared for in some way, shape, or form. How we policy those values into actuality is the debate. But we shared those values. This feels different. Something else has taken hold. And maybe it would be a good idea to root back into the original meaning of the word liberal. This is the central question I want to think about with you. And see if we can't find some of those shared core values that transcend the divisions of left and right, Democrat or Republican. Those labels are holding us all back now. They really have lost most of their original meaning anyway. So where does the word liberal come from? Well, forgive me, but this is something we do in philosophy. We do etymology. You know, we always want to know what is the root meaning of the word. And I'm not trained in classical languages, but thank God there is Wikipedia. So I did find out that the Latin word liber, meaning free, is the root of the word liberal, and obviously liberty and a bunch of other words like it. And then somebody figured this out, that the first recorded use of the word liberal was way back in 1375, when it was used to describe the liberal arts. Remember that phrase? Anybody within walking distance of a university, certainly is aware that that was a whole category of higher education, the liberal arts. There's the science building, and then there's the liberal arts, which just feeds right into the right-wing propaganda that universities are Marxist indoctrinational factories. But liberal arts, of course, means, as it was used in its very first use in 1375, as an education that is desirable for a freeborn man. And back then it would be men, right? Women being institutionally excluded. So why don't we just update that and say a well-rounded humanistic education that is desirable for anyone who wants to be more free. Why don't we learn a little bit about art and literature and history and political science and language? Oh, and astronomy and psychology and sociology and maybe a little biology. And why don't we read some books? And why don't we write some poetry? And why don't we act in a play? That's a liberal arts education, learning about the breadth of human endeavor and excellence. But it's really this guy here. I know, what a face. The British philosopher John Locke. John Locke, 1632, 1704. So that's, almost 100 years before the United States is kind of going to get started. But he's a huge, hot philosopher when people like Jefferson and others are coming up. So he's credited as the father of liberalism. And the way it was defined in the 1600s was quite different than the way Rush Limbaugh defined it, I assure you. And let's take a look at that. So he was a British guy and living under monarchy, and he was pained, really. He wasn't perfect, But he was pained by the disparity between the classes, and he was pained by the absence of individual liberty under monarchical rule. Monarchy was just a weird system that really oppressed people. And he started thinking about, what is good government? What is human nature? What should the state do and what should the state not do? So if you're a fan of political philosophy, this is an important voice to study. Let's just look at a few things that Locke did that make him the quote-unquote father of liberalism. So Locke argued that God, now he's a Christian, of course, as is the dominant religion in England at that time, and in his understanding then, God has endowed the world, endowed reality with something called natural law. And natural law, this comes from Thomas Aquinas back in the 14th century. Natural law is God's mind as present in reality. The Hindus might call it dharma. The structure that sustains and supports everything. The ancient Greeks called it logos. Maybe in China we would call it Tao. In the Star Wars universe we call it the Force. There's something, it's the supreme being archetype. It's the hidden structure of reality hidden from us by the sensory plane. And natural law then is the goodness and the principles of divine intention as woven into the fabric of reality, to be discovered by human reason and implemented in our institutions and in our laws. So human beings in this vision are the instruments through which natural law becomes actualized in policy, in governance. It's going to put human beings in the driver's seat here, not kings and queens. So it's kind of difficult for us modern people to see how radical Locke's idea is. So living under monarchy and the divine right of kings, we all, I think, remember that phrase from school. God gave kings and queens power. By divine right, the monarchs ruled over us. And any rights that we got were granted by the king. So there's the typology, right? God on top, the monarchy under God, and then us little people down here fighting over the scraps. And that's where we got our rights. We got our rights from the king. Locke is going to flip this whole thing on its head. That the ideal society, he argues, is one in which people govern themselves. That's crazy. And these days, maybe we are thinking it's crazy, but this is the ideal that strikes him as like, hey, maybe we should go in that direction, y'all. So under this idea is the notion of natural rights, that we are endowed by our Creator with the right, and this is Locke's language, by the right to life, health, liberty, and property. Oh, if Jefferson had just brought that one word health in. Oh my God. Although it's kind of implied, isn't it? Because Jefferson's going to write in the Declaration of Independence that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think if the Declaration says we have the right to life, then doesn't that imply we have the right to health because you need to be healthy to be alive? So is health care a right? Yeah, these are great questions, I think. So I don't know. But I'm thinking back, look, obviously, that this is going to have impact. These rights do not come from the monarch or the state. They are inherent within each individual. So in Locke's crazy idea, every human being born automatically has all of these rights. And the state has one function. The purpose of the state is to protect our individual liberties. So now in Locke's idea, the individual are on the top of the pyramid of the power structure. And then the individuals get together and they create this thing called the state, whose sole function is to protect individual liberty. That's the crazy idea. There's no kings and queens in this formula at all. So in other words, yes, it's true that sometimes and more often than we would like, governments are born of force and imposed on people by powerful elites like monarchies, the kind Locke was living under, like tyrannical oligarchies, plutocracies, kleptocracies, tyrannies of all kinds, totalitarian regimes who violently just tell everybody what to do and what to read and how to worship. In Locke's view, ideally, though, the best governments are created by and for and with the consent of the governed, a contract we willingly enter into. He called this the social contract form of government. Abraham Lincoln picks up some of that language, doesn't he? You know, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's the Lockean, Jeffersonian view. Now, in the social contract, we sacrifice some of our liberties for the protection that our union affords. We're going to have to raise some money to pay for the military. That protects the borders. That's a fundamental national duty. We make a law that you can't drive drunk because the rest of us have the right to life. And if you drive under the influence, you are impinging our basic fundamental right to not die. So if we catch you driving drunk, we're gonna put manacles on your wrist and throw you in jail. Under this form of government, the highest good is individual liberty, free from coercion of any state or any church. This is classic liberalism. It sounds like libertarianism, doesn't it? And look at how close the word libertarian and liberal are, because they both have in them this fundamental, highly individualistic sense of freedom. But they kind of do it quite differently. So Jefferson is listening for sure. And we have to do this. We have to look at just a little bit of the Declaration of Independence. I bet you didn't know we'd be talking about the Declaration of Independence tonight. Taking you back to school. Some of you know this. I just want to look at the opening passage, and oh, I know that font is so tiny. Let me just read this out loud. Listen for everything we've been doing so far. Listen to Locke's perspective about what freedom means, how individual liberty is centered here. And this whole first paragraph is really just kind of us tapping Mad King George on the shoulder politely and saying, "Excuse me, sir, we are going to revolt and break ties with you, but we are polite. We're not just going to start killing redcoats. We're going to write you a letter explaining why we are about to go to war with you." I mean, how civilized is that, right? So Jefferson says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature, look at how that gets capitalized, laws of nature and nature's God, curious phrase, entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires, I lost my place. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Here's the greatest hits part. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, and I know we mean something different by the word men now, don't we? We'll circle back and touch on some of that in a second. Let me stop interrupting myself. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these, this isn't the total list, but among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And here's the bit about the role of the state. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, elections, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, what ends? Individual liberty. It is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, elections, and to institute new government, laying its foundation of that new government on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Pretty heady stuff. Of course, Jefferson meant property-holding, rich, white men. And the plasticity of these documents is beautiful, because now we mean every imaginable kind of human being. And unalienable rights means rights that can never be separated from the person, because they are embedded in our existence as human beings. And the purpose of the state is to support individual liberty. And so what about religious liberty? That's one of the subtexts we're thinking about tonight. Our freedom to not worship at all, to be secular, outside of all spiritual or religious constructions. That person's freedom. The freedom to worship or conceive of divinity or ultimate reality in any way, shape, or form. All of that. What about those freedoms? So as we said earlier, and here's the full text of the First Amendment, the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or, and then all these other great rights, right? Abridging the freedom of speech, abridging the freedom of the press, abridging the right of the people peaceably to assemble. I think a lot of us have been assembling rather frequently lately, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So you hear in this language all kinds of Jeffersonian and Lockean ideas about individual human beings are more powerful than the state. And the purpose of the state, again, is to support their individual liberty. So nearly 100 years earlier, in his document called Letters Concerning Toleration, John Locke wrote these three statements. Earthly judges, the state in particular, and human beings generally, cannot dependably evaluate the truth claims of competing religious standpoints. I know that's 400-year-old weird English, but let me try to unpack that a little bit, that first bullet point. People. Just take the first 10 words. People. Earthly judges, whether it's the state or a person or whatever. People are not qualified to judge the merit of anyone else's religious claims. So shut up. Somebody wants to be Jewish or evangelical or Mormon or atheist or Sikh or Buddhist or Shinto or whatever, or any combination thereof, or what, the whole thing. Human beings ought to stay out of the business of opining on other people's experience of the sacred. Stop. Second point. Even if they could, enforcing a single quote-unquote true religion would not have the desired effect, because belief cannot be compelled by violence. So if somehow the majority of us reach the same conclusion, it's like, hey, yo, we got it. This is the best religion. Everybody do this. We're going to teach it in school with your tax dollars. He says even that is a terrible idea, because it wouldn't work. It would instantly create such pushback, such dissent. And the third point, coercing religious uniformity would lead to more social disorder than allowing diversity. And that's part of, I think, the bedrock liberal perspective. It's like, let's coerce people as little as possible. Let's leave people alone. What did Tim Walz say again and again on the campaign trail? It's none of your damn business what the people next door are doing. So in other words, from Locke's perspective and enshrined in the Constitution is this idea that the state has no business picking favorites or repressing any reasonable religious expression. God made us free, and free we shall remain. This is liberalism. And this is why the rise of Christian nationalism is particularly chilling, especially because right-wing conservative Christian nationalism is flipping the script and claiming that they're the ones under attack. You see how that works now. So the First Amendment, all of it, is Lockean to the core. So I wanted to give Brother John Locke his due tonight, because he's not exactly a household name. And I thought, maybe that would be worth doing, since he was such a huge influence on Jefferson and many of the other architects. But before I get to that bullet point, there's an elephant in the room. We all know Thomas Jefferson owned slaves, over 100 slaves, most of his life. His neighbors were freeing their slaves, working it out economically, but to his eternal discredit, he never could swing it, or chose not to. And if you've ever been to Monticello, his beautiful home in Virginia, next time you go to DC, rent a car, drive 90 minutes south through the beautiful hills of Virginia, and you get to Monticello, a beautiful mountain, right? Where Jefferson, an amazing figure in many ways, but it's a haunting experience to walk the halls of Monticello. Here's Mulberry Row, where all the slave quarters were, where the young boys worked in his nail factory, one of the main ways Jefferson made money, turning wire into nails. And all the stuff I learned about Thomas Jefferson in my whitewashed education in the 1960s and 70s, in my K through 12 years, it was all a terrible lie. I didn't learn about Sally Hemings until I was after I was in college. That he began sexually assaulting, I'm just going to say it. He began raping one of his 14-year-old slaves when she was 14. And she stayed with him for most of her life. I think she birthed a number of children to him. He took her to France when he was Secretary of State. A guy like that would get buried alive today. This is Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And he's Thomas Jefferson. There's a memorial to him. So these are the contradictions in the heart of our country. Oh, that's another thing that Christian nationalists don't want. They don't want you to hear any of these things. They don't want any of these taught. They don't want any of these things taught in school, because it makes white kids feel bad. Because white people's feelings are more important than, truth. So this is and John Locke did not own slaves personally, but he was invested in a number of funds that participated in international trade that profited from the ownership of human beings. Sometimes I read through the details of my STRS pension, and I get a little. Well, my state teacher's retirement pension. Anybody who has a 401k or a 403b or a pension is probably invested in a lot of things that they would not personally, morally want to be involved in either. So going to the next stage of our inquiry tonight, what this means, the very foundations of this beautiful, crazy American experiment, and many other countries around the world, by the way, in the post-monarchy era, are by definition liberal, Rush Limbaugh. The essential values of liberal democracy favor things that I think Republicans and Democrats would all like. If you left the word liberal or conservative or Democrat and Republican off, these things would poll really well among all Americans. Individual liberty, human rights, government by consent of the governed, equality before the law. And liberalism is also often including things like the right to private property, the right to bear arms. Who thought of that as a liberal policy? But it actually is. The Second Amendment is a liberal policy. Trust people to have handheld death-flinging machines. Free market economies. Who knew that classic liberalism doesn't like tariffs, doesn't like fixed markets, likes free trade. Let people make stuff and sell it to each other. Get out of the way. Stop rigging the game so a tiny tip of the pyramid makes all the money. Freedom of and from religion, or secularism. the rule of law. There's a lot of talk about that these days. Freedom of the press and independent academia. These are things that liberalism means. And so what liberalism opposes, let's flip it and think of it this way. Since so many UU congregations and services begin their service with the phrase, we are a liberal spiritual community, here's what liberalism opposes: hereditary privilege, state religion, any kind of coercion in religion, absolute monarchy. I mean, it's okay to have a decorative monarchy, that's kind of cool. But absolute, like the real thing, I don't know. But I'm Dutch, and we still have our royal family in Holland too. What do we have? I guess we have the Kardashians in America. Is that our royalty? I don't know. A little weak on the monarchy game there. So, but I know there's some people trying to build a monarchy right now. The divine right of kings. Who knew that would become a thing again? I read a lot on right-wing social media about how, he survived 2 assassination attempts. He's clearly anointed by God. And all the liberals are like, how can you call yourself a Christian and vote for this serial philanderer, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh, he's a sinner just like we are. God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. And all these phrases that used to be cool and now are like, they sound terrible now. And this idea that, look at King David, it's scripture. That guy was terrible. That guy was really terrible. I won't tell you all the things he did that would land him in prison if he weren't king. And all those ocracies, oligarchy, plutocracy, autocracy, kleptocracy, and whatever the heck this is. So liberalism is the defining political ideology of the modern age. We live, as much as Rush Limbaugh and Tucker Carlson might not want to hear this, we live in the age of the triumph of liberalism. And I guess I'm thinking tonight with you, why are we so timid about that? Why have we been cowed into silence by Rush Limbaugh's acerbic tongue? We've actually come to believe that there's something shameful about liberalism. And what I'm trying to document with you tonight is the opposite. Just how bedrock core liberalism is to a really chest-thumping, rah-rah, patriotic American vision. Why aren't we the ones waving the American flags? Have you noticed how the American flag has become a right-wing symbol? Why did we just let that happen? The only American flags I see in my San Carlos neighborhood, up on big, full-on official flagpoles, are flagpoles that also fly the Trump flag that I get to drive by every time I come and go in my neighborhood. Those are the guys with the American flags. And maybe that's something we can do something about. So what does freedom really mean? Let's, philosophers and words, right? We just got to do this. Does freedom mean the right to do whatever you want, whenever you want, and the heck with everybody else? I mean, when you're 13, I think that's what freedom means. No shame on the 13-year-olds. But I remember when I was, freedom just means doing whatever you feel like doing. And you're not really thinking about, but what about my responsibilities? No, you're just like, I want to eat some candy. I want to watch cartoons. Or is refusing to wear a mask in public during a deadly global pandemic a legitimate and reasonable expression of personal liberty? You heard that argument a lot during COVID, that first year, right? 2020, 2021. Millions of people are dying all over the world. You can't make me wear a mask. If the answer is no, then why is the answer no? Is our freedom interconnected with everyone else's freedom? I want to think about, for just a second, the Roman Stoic philosopher Epictetus. Right after the time of Christ, born a slave, earned his freedom later in life. Incredible philosopher, incredible voice. He asked this question that we're asking. And he puts it this way. He says, most people tend to delude themselves into thinking that freedom comes from doing what feels good or what fosters comfort and ease. The truth is that people who subordinate reason to their feelings of the moment are actually slaves of their desires and aversions. Slaves of their desires and fears. And that's not being free. He goes on, authentic freedom places demands on us. In discovering and comprehending our fundamental relations to one another and zestfully performing our duties, true freedom, which all people long for, that's key, is indeed possible. So he's redefining freedom as a beautiful synthesis of liberty and responsibility. Viktor Frankl, who wrote one of the most compelling Auschwitz books, there's Nacht or Night by Elie Wiesel. He was just a teenager at Auschwitz. Viktor Frankl was at Auschwitz and wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And Viktor Frankl made a casual remark. He says, the Statue of Liberty was great in the New York Harbor. That's a beautiful thing. But we should have also put a statue of responsibility in the San Francisco Bay. And bookended the country in those twin virtues. Because one without the other is impoverished or dangerous. So to think about liberty and responsibility concomitantly, simultaneously, interdependently is a really, I think, great tool to bring us into deeper appreciation of what freedom means. So is the great Thich Nhat Hanh, of course, and his particular brand of sort of activist Zen Buddhism. Buddhist interdependence, and many of us have studied Buddhism. It's hard to miss in the UU world or even on our own through other avenues. And so this idea that comes right out of Buddhist metaphysics, that all energy, all matter, and all consciousness is interdependent. That is, in his phrase, there is no being, there is just interbeing. Nothing exists on its own. There is deep mutuality in all phenomena, all events, all happiness, all happenings. So our understanding of liberty and freedom must be tempered and informed by the realization of our utter interdependence, that there is no me without you, there is no me without us. So we've heard a lot of talk tonight from Locke and others about individuals. And one criticism against that sort of European Enlightenment vision is it's too individualistic. It's too much about my freedom and me getting mine. And I love introducing this Buddhist perspective to kind of temper what was only implied in that European liberalism, and that is our deep, deep reliance on one another. I can't pull myself up by my own bootstraps. I didn't even make my own boots. I'm dependent, and the Hindu idea of dharma makes this clear too. I didn't make the air that I breathe, the water that I drink, the clothes on my back. I didn't build this room. I didn't design my car that I drove here. I mean, I just get up in the morning and pull on my pants and have a cup of coffee and try to keep up. But my whole life is built on countless natural systems nested within systems, tens of thousands of human beings and all of their beautiful creativity and ingenuity and work that make this world that I get to share in. That's mutuality. That's interdependence. Nothing causes itself. Nothing exists independent of everything else. And from this metaphysical foundation, our ethical and moral obligations become clear. You can't talk about freedom divorced from this fact. Individual liberty doesn't mean anything unless you're also framing it in this metaphysical perspective. Even Jesus, for any Christians in the room, you know that even Jesus and the disciples didn't go around offering dogmatic certainties. They just went to work. They just healed people, and they challenged oppressive systems. And they broke down barriers. Healing woundedness and radical inclusion enhances everyone's freedoms. I can't be free until everybody is free. What's that great line from Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail? Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. In the last two or 3 years of his life, Dr. King met Thich Nhat Hanh. And they were working together in the U.S. And Thich Nhat Hanh kind of hipped Dr. King to the Vietnam War situation. And the last 2 years of his life, King wasn't talking about civil rights as much anymore. He was talking about the Vietnam War. And why do we always send the poor? Which ends up being in a System of the Down song, but I'll leave that aside for tonight. So I think I want to start to wrap up and maybe bring us out of the darkness of all of these hard things we've been facing tonight. And starting to understand maybe there's power, maybe there's untapped power in liberalism that we've been ashamed of. So by exploring the core values of liberalism, we may have, it's just me hoping, we may have stumbled onto a core set of principles that transcend our tired, hard binaries of liberal versus conservative, Democrat versus Republican. And by the way, as I just stuck this in right before I got here, I'm like, as a philosophy professor who teaches Marx in my Philosophy 101 class, I'm particularly offended by the repeated misuse of the words Marxist and Marxism. It pisses me off. And every time Marjorie Taylor Greene lobs a "you're a Marxist" on somebody, I'm like, girl, we need to talk. Have you read one page of Karl Marx? Anyway, I digress. Let me get back to work here. Well, the last thing you need is to hear me lecture about another long-dead white European philosopher. So what if we avoided all of these words? Yeah, what if we avoided all of these words? Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, left, right, Marxist. What if we just started over? Let's get rid of all those words. They're so screwed up, they're so useless, they're just trigger words now. And instead root our conversations in our shared values. Some of us did a lot of anti-racism training 5 years ago after the summer of George Floyd. A bunch of white liberals like me got in rooms and read all the books and talked, and then we brought in our African-American brothers and sisters and we listened to their experience and we talked about it. You know, it was a really beautiful, heady time. I've even done some Zoom workshops with this community about what we could all do to push back against white supremacy and racism. Difficult work that will always go on. But one of the things that I think that was so crucial out of that is when you are in the presence of someone with deeply racist consciousness, to, instead of fight them and argue with them, to find that one thing you have in common. and from there, kind of nod at each other. Well, at least we have that kind of simpatico around that one eye. And from that little teeny footprint of common ground and empathy, we can then start to expand by just telling stories, just like you learn in marriage therapy. Use I statements instead of like, well, you shouldn't think like that because you're, so, you know, when I had this, when I noticed in myself this sudden kind of prejudice rise up. You know, I was a community college teacher during 9/11, and I had Saudi students, foreign exchange students in my classroom, all men, of course. And the day after 9/11, I came to school and I was afraid of them. And I looked at their backpacks on the ground and I had some thoughts I'm not proud of. And now we know 2 of the 18 9/11 hijackers who lived in La Mesa and went to the mosque in La Mesa and lived with a Muslim family there that didn't know that they were in sleeper cells and went to Grossmont College 2 miles from my house. They lived in America for 2 years before they flew planes into the World Trade Center. And I start my anti-racism conversations with my racist white brothers and sisters with that story. It's like, I know what it feels like to feel prejudice come up in you, to make racist assumptions about other people. And then they look at me and they're like, yeah, well then you know what I mean. And now all of a sudden we're like, hey, let's go have a beer. But I don't drink, so. And then this common ground thing is what I'm trying to think about with you here. How do we repair our families who have split apart along these political lines? How do we take back all of this? How do we find that common ground? And maybe, this is my crazy thought today, recruit diverse individuals into the mission of reassessing these core principles and reasserting them. And under the banner of two simple words. Remember, we've already got rid of all that left-right, Democrat, Republican stuff. Let's just talk about things everybody loves. Freedom and dignity. And taking back and centering the concepts of freedom, of individual liberty, of human dignity, of patriotism, and of the great potential of the American experiment as a system that is uniquely poised to enhance those core principles. Could this be a path back from the madness that we're in? I'm not offering this as a prescription. Again, this is an inquiry. It is an investigation of possible paths out of this. And this, as you know, is madness. This is bad. On every level. People are being ground up. And our values that I thought we were working together to build are being rapidly undone. To the point where paralysis has kind of taken over. And that's a problem. So believe it or not, I'm actually very optimistic. I simply refuse to believe that the human experience is going to end like this. I don't know what's next, but I have a conviction, and here's where I'm going to start. Nobody else has to do this, but I am never again going to apologize for being liberal. I'm going to start using the word more loudly and proudly and proactively, even if I have to explain for 45 minutes what the word means. I'm going to be that guy. Look out. I'm not going to bow or bend to the propaganda that liberalism is some sort of dystopian, soul-crushing collectivism where all individuality is lost, because that's how Marjorie Taylor Greene uses the word liberalism. I'm not going to, or Marxism. I'm not going to bow to that. That masterful and deceitful messaging perfected by pundits like Rush Limbaugh, Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, and of course too many others to count, that has for now won. And there are many players, and we could take weeks and weeks to talk about all that. So the project to me, it seems like right now the project has never been more urgent to reclaim the idea of freedom in our religious communities, in our spiritual communities, in our political citizenry, to reclaim the idea that freedom as a trans-political, metaphysical principle. I just made up a new word, trans-political. I mean, it's sort of beyond politics, because this is a metaphysical principle. Freedom, it doesn't belong to any political party. Because in the end, this isn't about politics. This is about human dignity. And I just so empathize. Y'all don't have the problem here in the UU world. It's nice. Your clergy are free to get up here and talk about politics because political activism is so deeply interwoven into the UU mission. But in a lot of other mainline Christian churches, our Methodist brothers and sisters, our Lutheran brothers and sisters, our Presbyterian brothers and sisters, United Church of Christ, these are liberal, progressive, mainline Protestant churches, and ministers in those places, they get that, they still get the message. Not Caleb Lyons. He does whatever the hell he wants at UCC, but he's fabulous. He's the one example of, like, he's so political on the pulpit, it's amazing. But a lot of mainline Christian churches, they still get the message, why do you have to get political? Don't talk politics. I'm here for religion. I don't need politics. But it's a funny criticism, because to me, politics is nothing but the enactment of our values. And if you can't talk about values on a pulpit, where are you supposed to talk about values? So a lot of liberal progressive ministers I know kind of do a lot of pretzel twisting. They don't talk about candidates, they don't talk about policies, but they talk about the kind of issues that we've been thinking about tonight, the kind of principles about human dignity and so on. Anyway, it's a tough time to be a preacher. It's always a tough time to be a preacher, but this is particularly hard. So Locke and Jefferson were right, I think, that government must be made to serve the individual, all individuals, not the other way around. So what can we do? You know, what can liberal, progressive, spiritual communities like this one, what can we do? What role do we have in reclaiming and reasserting individual liberty and human dignity as core American values? Because they are. Religion, and this is very broad and general, but I think religion is ultimately about moral salvation, mutual care, and loving inclusion. I agree with Father Richard Rohr. Christianity went wrong 1,500 years ago, and it became about individual salvation, me not going to hell. And in Father Richard Rohr's understanding, Christ's message was always about universal salvation, universal reconnection to God. The word religio in Greek and relegare in Latin, that's where the word religion comes from. And it means simply to link back or to reunify. What if all religion is just about coming in out of the cold, coming out of alienation and into community, coming out of isolation and into oneness? That's what draws people into communities like this. Fellowship, whether it's the Sangha or it's the Catholic Mass or the mosque on Friday. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote this beautiful line that you must love in such a way that the person you love feels free. Good relationship advice and really good advice for every spiritual community. If your congregants leave feeling more free than when they walked in, they'll come back. When they leave feeling like they're in trouble, they won't come back. So what if we started to think of religion as liberation, recentering liberty and individuality in our spiritual practice and in our spiritual community, something y'all have been doing for many, many, many decades and centuries even. So I know you know this, that the UU community and ideology has been at the tip of the spear of this idea of centering liberal dignity in the heart of what draws you all together. Deep, deep commitment to very serious freedom. But how do we get this guy to come to a Unitarian church? And I don't know if we want that even. But I live pretty close to Santee, and sometimes I pop over there to hit the Costco or whatever. And you see these lifted trucks with big Trump flags and big American flags in the back. And it's that question I have again. When did we lose the American flag? When did it become a kind of big F you to liberals to do that? It's a fascinating question. So at the heart of this inquiry tonight is this image of this sort of fractured American identity. And it's true that the United States is built on multiplicity, multiculturalism, diversity of perspectives and experiences, and all the races and ethnicities. My family is an immigrant family. I'm a first-generation American. My mom and dad endured Nazi occupation in the Netherlands and barely escaped with their lives. I grew up with countless family stories about surviving fascism, literally, about my uncle in the underground, and about my paternal grandfather who was taken by the Nazis to the notorious political prison camp Buchenwald, and how his son, my dad, was also taken to a slave labor camp in Germany because he had a trade. He was a printer. And the stories of my young mom and her father starving during the Nazi occupation. By the end of the war, they were frying potato peels in Vaseline. My mom was one of those people that could never throw food away, you know? I grew up in a house where, oh, the cheese is moldy, let me just cut all that cheese off for you and make you a little cheese sandwich for your school lunch. I'd be like, Mom, all the other kids have lunch money. It's like, you'll eat this cheese sandwich. And so I just, in my own life, if I could just do a second of memoir there's this lived taste in my mouth of the savagery and brutality that arises when powerful, tyrannical, racist violence crushes the goodness of ordinary people who just want to live their lives and leave their neighbors alone. But that doesn't protect us against people who believe they are so right that they are willing to drive tanks over our politeness until all of our rights are gone and we're all shipped off to camps. So I know this is a terrible way to start a 3-day assembly. And I'm willing to give you a complete refund on my honorarium. But I knew that if I couldn't raise these things in a UU assembly, I couldn't raise them anywhere. That y'all were the only people who would sit through a talk like this and not walk out. And that is a virtue and a power and a strength, a fearlessness that just inspires me to the core. Y'all didn't need to have to agree with everything I said tonight, obviously. I'm not the boss of you. That's not what my role is. My role is to cause a little good trouble on the intellectualism side of things, as the woman in the video from San Luis Obispo said. I'm not going to lead you through that cool thing, which was very cool, by the way. Maybe somebody else could do that. But I wanted to think about all of these more sobering and somber topics so that we might feel emboldened to pray deeper into our own convictions and see where this goes next. So I think there's a couple of minutes. Do we do Q&A? Unitarians always do Q&A, right? Do we want to do any of that? Is that in the program, or should we get right to what's next? I'm going to go with the group conscience here. I yield to the group. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, you're beautiful. Thank you, Tanya. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, for those people who are guests in our campus area, I just wanted to remind you that that parking ticket that you get, you tell them when you go through, I'm part of the assembly, you'll be golden, right? Yeah, Louise say, show your badge. Anyway, and breakfast is at 8 o'clock. So, safe travels home.
passions, and we support and build upon their passions and interests to make our impact. Through our Share the Plate